It is so good to be here today, and usually what I do before a program is I work the room and get to know you a little bit better and shake your hand and smile into your eyes. But unfortunately, Saturday I fell and broke my foot. So I'm just very pleased that not one person who knows that I give speeches said break a leg today. Each of you, at some time in your career, come to a crossroad where should you turn left or should you turn right? And sometimes we turn left and then years later it's like, wonder what would have happened had I turned right. Each of you at some point in your life have to reinvent yourself. In my own story, most of my skill sets were in rural America until I moved to Chicago. And then, woohoo, that was quite a change of skill sets. Each of you will have the opportunity to ask yourself, do I want to stay in the same occupation, in the same industry? Or do I want to stay in the same occupation, in a different industry? Or are you sick of the occupation you've been doing to date and you never want to do it again, but a little confused about what that something new is going to be? These are all examples of different ways that people reinvent themselves. And sometimes people ask themselves the question, is it time for me to make money at a hobby or an interest or some cause that I'm very passionate about? From writing to playing the drums to all sorts of things, fixing other people's cars. Is it time to make money at that rather than doing it as a volunteer? Some of you may even be asking, is it time to launch a business? The first thing that you want to do when you reinvent yourself is you have to come up with an idea that you can test against market conditions. If you don't have an idea, then that's the first step. Let me help you come up with that idea. Now, I'm going to tell a story. I want you to listen carefully because at some point I'm going to stop the story and then there's going to be group participation because this is a story about a young woman who was very lost in her career, couldn't figure it out, and I'm going to give you several clues as we go along and then we're going to brainstorm occupations and career ideas for her. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Molly Juliet, and when she was 8 years old, she came running up to her parents and said, "Guess what I want to be when I grow up?" And they said, "What?" And she said, "I want to be a manager at McDonald's." And then she said, "Of course you're going to have to take me there a lot so I can watch them work." Well, they laughed because just 2 weeks before she wanted to be a circus clown. And before that, she wanted to make robotic dancing. And so they figured this idea would fade just like the other ones did. But it didn't. When she got into high school, she got a job at McDonald's. And she loved it. In college, she worked part-time at McDonald's. And she loved it. She graduated from college and quickly went from crew leader to assistant manager to regional manager, over 20 stores. And she loved it. About 5 years later, she woke up one day and went, "I don't like my job anymore. Matter of fact, I'm sick of smelling like French fries and hamburgers. I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't have a clue what to do." So Molly did what many of us do. She started to complain to her friends. And one friend said, "Well, do you remember how when you were a sophomore in college, you spent a semester in a co-op at a construction company where you got to walk around and be with different occupations like scheduler, estimator, even rough-in carpenter. You even got to follow the owner around for a couple of weeks. Why don't you go back to work in construction?" And before Molly could even think about it, her friend said the magical words, "And you know, my father owns a construction company and he's hiring." Say no more. she got a job as a rough-in carpenter. And she liked it. She liked moving her body. She liked lining out all of her materials and making sure it was done very efficiently. But she didn't like being outdoors, and she didn't like that 80% of her coworkers smoked. So another friend said, "Why don't you sell cell phones? Everybody needs one." She got a job selling cell phones. Within 2 months, she realized that she had made a horrible mistake. She didn't like selling cell phones. She didn't even like phones. As a matter of fact, she didn't even like talking on the phone. And finally, one of her friends said, "You know, you're pretty lost. Why don't you go see a career practitioner?" And that's what she did. The very first thing Molly said was, "All my life, all I've wanted to be was a manager at McDonald's, and I don't have a clue what to do now that I don't want to be a manager." Well, the career practitioner said, "That's interesting because I disagree with you. You have been leaving clues your entire life. And it's our job to pay attention to those clues and to put together a new career plan for you." So the career practitioner said, "I want you to tell me when you enjoyed McDonald's, what was it about it that you enjoyed?" And she said, "Well, I enjoyed training people who this was their very first job and helping them be efficient." And the career practitioner said, "I'm not quite sure this is it, though, that sweet spot for you." And she goes, "Well, this may sound silly, but I was always the one that fixed the French fry machine. I never had to call somebody in. You know, I always could figure out how to fix things that broke down." And the career practitioner said, "I think there's something more that you enjoyed." And finally, Molly smiled from ear to ear and she said, "Rush hour. I loved rush hour. Nothing pleased me more than when there was 12 people deep and they were coming in faster and faster and I could get them through the line. As a matter of fact, I invented a way to get people through the drive-thru so fast that the owner of the company had me going around to the 19 other stores training them that system on how to get people through the drive-thru. I love that." The career practitioner said, "Great. Now, talk to me about a time in your life in high school. What did you enjoy doing, did it well, and was proud of yourself?" Molly said, "Oh dear, I wasn't that good of a student in high school. Oh, I know. When I was a sophomore in high school, we had a high C can stacking contest. And each of us had a crew of 4 people, and I quickly took leadership over my crew, and I figured out how to stack these cans. And you know what else? We were not allowed to have ladders. We were not allowed to have chairs to stack these as high as we could. And I got my crew to build a stack of high C cans 12 feet high. And I won the prize." All right, well, tell me about a time when you were a really little kid. What did you do then that you enjoyed doing? And Molly said very sheepishly, "Well, I like tearing things apart and putting them back together. And one time I tore my mother's hairdryer apart. I couldn't get it back together. And I got in trouble for that, but I always just liked to know how things worked." So we're going to stop the story, and I'm going to ask you, let's brainstorm. What are some things that each of these stories had in common with the others? What were things that Molly was good at?
They all included physical activity.
Right. She really enjoyed moving her body. What else? Yes?
Be good at managing a lot of different moving pieces, whether it was parts or people.
Right. What else?
Figuring out how things work.
Figuring out how things worked. Yes, absolutely. What else?
Work well under pressure.
Loved pressure, didn't she? In front of you, you have a skill set shuffle. And we're going to move those skill sets around to brainstorm different occupations. Do you see them? Now later I'm going to be challenging you to come up with your own skill sets, but for now let's just focus on Molly. Kat, would you read the first set of clusters under there?
What careers might Molly pursue? Should she choose to only use improving systems, spatial planning, and mechanical curiosity?
Okay, guys, what occupations use those 3 sets of skills? IT, very good. What else? Operations, very good. What else? Logistics, very good. What else? All right, let's go down to the next set. And Kat, go ahead and read the next set.
What careers might Molly pursue if she chose to only use being physically fit and moving and training others?
All right, so what if she chose to just use those 2 skill sets? What occupations might she consider there?
Fitness consultant.
Fitness consultant? What?
Instructor.
I'm sorry, what?
Yoga instructor.
A yoga instructor, yes. What else?
Physical therapy, maybe?
Physical therapist, yes.
Coaching maybe?
Coaching, very good. Now, does this sound like someone who wants a desk job? No. Where might she fit? Now, we've got some career ideas for Molly. Now it's time to come up with more. And this is for your own use as well, where when you have a brainstorming party, you want to come up with skill sets, interest, working conditions, the money you want to make, and you also want to make sure that you have things that other people can help you with brainstorming. So when you create yours, put your own personality in it. Come up with phrases, come up with jargon, and just have fun with it. What I was trying to illustrate with Molly's story is when you cluster skills in different ways, different occupations show up. Now this is the beginning of creating an ideal profile for the world of work. When you brainstorm what you want to do next, you want to have your high energy skills, you want to have your top values, you want to have working conditions that bring out the best in you. How much money do you want to make? You also want to list your interest, causes, and curiosities. Now there's lots of ways to come up with your interest list, and for some people who kind of get stuck with that, just go into a bookstore and see what areas of the bookstore you naturally gravitate toward. And there's lots of other ways, because there's Dun & Bradstreet, $1 Million Seller, there's other databases that are categorized. But the more that you can come up with that forms that ideal profile, the more likely you'll attract 80% of what you have on your list. There's no such thing as the perfect job where you get 100% of what you ask for, but you want to be clear about what your trade-offs are and what's non-negotiable. Now, the other thing that you can use brainstorms for is career deficits. Like if you really want to be a writer and you don't have any evidence of being a writer, you're only a thinker, how do you compensate for that? Or if you really want to launch a business that takes people all over the world showing them exotic birds, and you don't know how to be a business owner or putting together a plan, how do you compensate for that? And how are you going to raise the money if you leave your day job? Those are some deficits. Some more serious ones are if you have skeletons in your closet. And some of those skeletons could be legal, some of them could be health, financial. If you have huge debt and in 90 days you're going to lose your house, those are some serious deficits that need to be compensated for. One of the ways to overcome them is to have a brainstorming party, saying, here's something that's getting in the way of my career success. What would you suggest I do, or how would you suggest I talk about these things in ways that are very, very powerful? So that's what I meant by alligators in the water. There are things out there that will get in the way or slow you down if you don't plan for them in advance. For some of you, you are in a place of discouragement and you have a job interviewing come up next week and you have to act like you're a perky person when in fact you're not. All of those things are things that can be planned for and compensated for. I worked with a woman who had been a registered nurse for 25 years. She and her husband had planned on retiring. And the plan was that in their retirement, she could do her artwork full-time that she only had time to do on the weekends. She was so excited about this. 2 weeks after she retired, her husband left her. And it was like, didn't see it coming. And to say that she went into a deep depression would be an understatement, because she was like right there at the cusp of doing what she loved to do, which was her art. And I had already been working with her when this travesty happened, and she wasn't leaving her house. And one day I called her and I said, I have an assignment for you. And she said, I don't want to do any assignments. I can barely get out of bed. And I said, that's okay. When you get out of bed, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get stark naked, put feathers between your toes, and run around your house screaming. You could hear a pin drop. And she went, but why would you want me to do that? And I said, because if you can pull that off, this job search is going to be a piece of cake. And within 2 weeks, she was back in the game. And within 6 months, she had made a successful career transition into being a medical illustrator, where she got to use her art and she got to use her medical background, and so she didn't have to compromise anything. And neither do you. And that's my challenge to you as you go out and reinvent yourself, to not compromise. Do your career research meetings. Don't make assumptions. Ask the market itself what the market will bear and the market will not bear. And when you do your career research meetings, do not believe one person's opinion. Because if one person says there is no way in H you're going to get into advertising, that's just one person's opinion. But if you hear it 6 times, maybe compensatory strategies are in order now, or to abandon that idea altogether. Well, you guys have been great, and I'll be available for more questions afterwards.